Cloud Atlas is a movie that will leave you questioning the meaning of life, love, and if you'll ever be able to untangle it, the plot. But at least you'll have a good laugh trying. The movie begins with a prologue with this old man who looks like he got into a fight with a bear or something. There's a large cut by the side of his left eye, and it appears the story we're about to watch in this movie is going to be about him. Anyway, leaving that aside, we get a warning at the beginning of this movie that this is going to be a tale of madness, with many flash forwards and flashbacks. So I advise you to sit tight and get ready for what looks like it might be the wildest ride you've been on in a while. Of course, barring any Christopher Nolan movie to have ever existed. Precisely, there are 6 eras, and we will be jumping between these eras alternatively, all through the story beginning with 1849 in the Pacific Islands. Just in case it's a trigger for you, there's going to be people owning other people here, and it's quite ugly, so just a heads up. Plus, their English is the olden type, and gosh. So we meet this fine young man, Adam, who visits a certain Reverend Horrocks and his plantation. Of course, when you hear plantation in the 19th century, and then you throw in a white man, you should know what's coming. Anyway, while taking a tour around the plantation and watching the people work, Adam stumbles onto a public flogging exercise. I'll spare you the horrors, but you can tell that the scene is so ugly. Adam literally faints after watching the scene, but it could also be a result of infestation from a Polynesian worm too. Anyway, we jump over to Cambridge in 1936, where we meet 2 men, Robert Frobisher and Rufus Sixsmith. They're lying in bed together, and you can tell they are into each other. Be that as it may, Robert has a dream to be rich and famous, so he's leaving his lover in Cambridge and going to check out this guy, Vivian Aries, in Edinburgh. Apparently Vivian is a musical genius, but he's kinda ill, and not in the good way, so he hasn't been able to produce new pieces. Robert wants to get Vivian to hire him, so he can use that as a stepping stone to being the greatest British composer. Vivian is kind of a jerk, though pretty much impossible to please. His wife, though, is quite pleasing to look at, and Robert made sure to look at her a lot. Well, to be fair, she looked back. Curious to see how that goes. Alright, we're now in the next era. This time it's 1973, San Francisco, and we see a very young and attractive Halle Berry walking out of a party, with what seems like a jerk boyfriend trailing behind and begging her to stay. Louisa, the character Halle Berry plays, is a journalist, by the way. And on her way out of the party and hopefully her relationship, she gets stuck in an elevator with this old man that looks very much like an aged Sixsmith. Yep, that's him. And thankfully, Mr. Kippen, the jerk she walked out on, was just a guy she was interviewing for her magazine and not her boyfriend. When they're in the elevator, it gets hot. No, not that kind of hot. Just like the temperature. So Louisa takes off her jacket to reveal a birthmark somewhere close to her shoulder. Sixsmith remarks that the birthmark was similar to one on someone he knew and cared about very much, probably Robert. As they keep talking, Sixsmith asks her a peculiar question about what length she'd be willing to go to protect a source. Louisa pretty much tells him that she'd do anything, and then Sixsmith gets this look. Alright, next era. This time it's London 2012, and we meet this old man publisher with his mouthy client. Mouthy client Dermot is played by Tom Hanks, and it's difficult for me to concentrate for a few seconds because come on, it's Tom, America's sweetheart. What happens in the next couple of minutes though has nothing to do with sweetness. You see, Dermot's published a book, but this critic gave it a really bad review, probably because it wasn't so great. Dermot wasn't having it, though, so he picked the guy up and freaking threw him off the roof. Right, in the middle of a party. He didn't even flinch, just grabbed a drink after. But because we have a problem as a race, I mean the human race, somehow Dermot's murder suddenly makes his book a bestseller. His editor, Timothy Cavendish, couldn't be more pleased because he's in money. He did get hassled by Dermot's brothers though. They were entitled to their own share of the cake after all. Now we're in dystopian Neo-Seoul in the year 2144. Why does everybody always picture the future in this exact same format? Anyway, we're taken to a prison facility where this weird looking man that seems like he'd be a great fit in the Star Wars movie is interviewing a female prisoner. She refers to herself as a fabricant and the interviewer as an archivist. The archivist is also an official of unanimity, whatever that means. Our fabricant's name is Sanmi451, but we'll just call her Sanmi because shorter name. And from her story, she belongs to this class of humanoid clones designed to serve as waiters and sussy workers in this restaurant called Papa Song. As you can expect in a typical Hollywood dystopian setting, everything is super weird. Anyway, the main point of the archivist's inquiry is to find out about a certain rebel server, Yuna939, a friend of Sanmi. Yo, what made Yuna infamous? Well, on one particular day, she hit a customer at the restaurant who harassed her, and so for defending herself, she got clapped by the seer, who I guess is the CEO of Papa Song. And then we move to a new era, 106 winters after the fall, in a place called the Big Isle. Here we see Tom Hanks again, but he's another person in this era, called Zachary. Zachary has a brother, Adam, and Adam has a son, Jonas. One day Adam is attacked by some attackers, and instead of Zachary helping his brother, he hides in safety as he watches the attackers clap Adam and his son. He carries the guilt in his heart forever, obviously. But one day, the Prussians come visiting his village, led played by Meronim, who's Louisa from the 1973 era. Like I said, keep up. Lots of eras and lots of reincarnation stuff going on here. Anyway, Meronim is hosted by Rose, Zachary's sister. By the way, Zachary's village worships Sanmi, the humanoid clone prisoner we just met in the last era we stopped at. Also, Zachary is constantly followed up by this devil-type character who's always telling him bad stuff, like how he should not help his brother when his brother was obviously at the point of death. Meanwhile, we're taken back to Adam, the lawyer that fainted after watching a worker get beat. He's on a voyage now to San Francisco and still looks quite sickly. While in his cabin, he begins making an entry in his journal. But now, fast forward to 1936, and Robert, the one who wants to be a famous music composer, is reading that journal. Problem? Half the pages are missing, and he writes the Sixsmith to help him search for the book in his own house. As we watch Robert search for the journal, we're taken to 1973, where Sixsmith is rereading that particular letter from his old lover. After reading the letter, he decides to take Louisa on her offer the last time they met, so he puts a call through to her to tip her off on some kind of conspiracy going on at the company he works for. Over in 2012, Timothy is working his butt off to find £50,000 to pay Dermot's gangster brothers. After turning to all of his friends and getting disappointed, he decides to turn to his very wealthy brother, Denny. At first, Denny is not interested in helping his brother, but then after a curious non-vocal exchange between Timothy and his wife, he agrees to give his brother a helping hand and a place to hide in the meantime. While on the boat, Adam meets Atwa, the worker he saw getting beat. Atwa wants Adam's help to join the ship's crew as a free man, but Adam isn't so sure at first, because racism. Anyway, we quickly go from there back to Zachary's village, where we find out that Atwa is a captain with the prescience in this life. Interesting. Meanwhile, back in 73, Louisa is on her way to hear what Sixsmith has to say, but before Robert can hand her the file containing the evidence of the conspiracy to her, a hitman comes into his room and takes him out. In his room, Louisa finds some old letters between Sixsmith and his lover, Robert. In the 2144 timeline, Seer Ray is dead, and Sanmi is now on the run because the enforcers are going to take over with Seer Ray gone, and if they find out that she has any connection to Yuna, she's dead meat. So this guy's helping her escape to Neo Seol. At least I hope he is. Anyway, we're taken back to Zachary's village, where he and Meronim are getting a little friendly. Meronim tells Zachary about her desire to check out Mana Sol, a place Zachary's people believe to be inhabited by the devil himself, or herself. As they're walking, the bridge they're on breaks, but they're able to escape for safety before those attackers that killed Adam come after them. At that moment, it occurs to Zachary that Abbas's words were true. Previously, he had had a dream which Abbas, the village's priestess, had interpreted and followed up with a warning that eventually came to pass with the broken bridge. When he goes back to seek Abbas's counsel, she reminds him of Sanmi's words. That's when we find out that Zachary's village worships Sanmi, and their sacred text is their testimony as recorded by the archivist. A quote from Sanmi kinda underpins the story of this movie, so I'm just going to say it. Our lives are not our own. From womb to tomb, we're bound to others, past and present, and by each crime and every kindness, we birth our future. So you kinda see the philosophy of the movie now, I guess. Anyway, where are we now? Yes, Adam has decided to help Atwa, and Robert informs Sixsmith in one of his letters that Louisa is reading that he has started composing his own music. Louisa goes to look for the Cloud Atlas, and when she hears it, she feels like she's heard it before. In fact, she knows it, but it's obviously impossible for her to have known it since there aren't many copies of the music available. The store owner tells her. Probably isn't on iTunes either. Now let's get back to Timothy, the editor. After Timothy's meeting with his brother, the next time we see him, he's on a train. While on board, he recounts the story of his first love, Ursula, whom he had cowardly abandoned after a sleepover gone wrong at Ursula's parents' house. Fun fact, he broke a few ribs, and the cat even had a tasty bite of his you-know-what. Somehow his journey takes him right to Ursula's door. While he's contemplating whether or not to go in, we're taken back to Zachary's village. His niece, Katkin, is sick to the point of death, and Zachary needs Meronim's help. In exchange, Zachary is willing to take her to the devil's door himself. Meanwhile, Sanmi is now in Neo Seol where her collar is being removed. So yeah, she's free now. Well, free-ish, because I still don't trust this guy that's helping her. Apparently he's pureblood and Union, a rebel group going against the unanimity. As Sanmi settles into her new accommodation, her benefactor helps her find the complete version of a movie that Yuna had shown her while she was still at Papa's song. Guess what? It's titled The Ghastly Ordeal of Timothy Cavendish, our editor, which takes us back to his own journey. As you may have guessed, a coward forever remains a coward, so Timothy does not walk up to Ursula's door. Instead, he continues with Denny's plan and heads on to this weird hotel called Aurora House. At least he thinks it's a hotel. In reality, the hotel turns out to be a nursing home with this really mean nurse, Nurse Noakes. The woman literally gives him a dirty slap on his first day there. Denny sure is a funny one, isn't he? Literally sent his brother to a nursing home on the guise of getting him a hiding place from Dermot's brothers. But guess why? Yup, remember the interesting look between Timothy and Denny's wife? Yup, he clapped his brother's wife. So it was payback time. In the next scene, we see Sanmi and her friend, Haiju, watching the movie, The Ghastly Ordeal of Timothy Cavendish. In the movie, Timothy is played by Zachary, who, don't forget, is played by Tom Hanks. And there also seems to have been a lot of creative liberties taken with the movie. Watching movies was not the only thing Sanmi and and Haiju did, though. And no, they didn't do the sort of extracurricular activities you're thinking. Haiju just started exposing Sanmi to knowledge. The goal of making Yuna and Sanmi, it turned out, was to create a free-willed fabricant. Yuna would have been that person, but she failed, so it's up to Sanmi now. Meanwhile, in 1973, Louisa makes her way to Sixsmith's company to do some investigation. There she meets Joe Napier, the company's head of security, and both of them look at each other like they know each other somehow. By the way, this Joe Napier was a butler for Reverend Horrocks in the 1849 era. While at the company, Louisa finds Sixsmith's office and goes snooping. While there, she meets Isaac, again played by Tom Hanks, and you can already see the chemistry brewing. Over in Neo Seoul, Sanmi and Haiju have visitors. As we found out before, Haiju is a rebel, so I guess the authorities have now come for him and Sanmi. He tries to escape with Sanmi, but while they're on a bridge, trying to get to the other side, Haiju falls off. Meanwhile, the authorities pick up Sanmi from their chopper and get her arrested. While in prison, she's informed by the head of Unanimity that Haiju had been killed. Poor girl curls up and just cries. Moving on, Louisa and Isaac are getting to know each other better, and Isaac is making up his mind to help her with her investigation, regardless of the risk to his life. Meanwhile, Meronim and Zachary are on their way to the Mana Sol. Remember that both couples in both eras are played by the same actors, Tom Hanks and Halle Berry. I'm mentioning this so you can remember that there's still some reincarnation brouhaha going on here. The 1973 couple, though, are not exactly having it great. As I said, Isaac gave Louisa Sixsmith's report that would incriminate the company he worked for, but then after that he traveled. Of course, CEO Hooks would do anything to save his hide, so he sends his hitmen to blow up Isaac's plane, killing Isaac. He also tries to clap Louisa by running her car off a bridge. Sixsmith's report is destroyed. However, Louisa miraculously survives. As for Adam, his illness is getting worse, despite the fact that he's been receiving treatment from his doctor, Henry Goose. Quite the name. Goose is played by Tom Hanks, by the way. But the Goose is a thieving doctor that's trying to kill Adam so he can steal his gold. Meanwhile, in 1936, Robert is about to have a rude awakening. He has finally happened on a beautiful piece of music he calls the Cloud Atlas, but Vivian is threatening to expose him as liking both girls and guys. It was a real sin back then, if Robert does not credit him with ownership of the work. Robert plans to escape anyway. At least someone from another era is having things good. Turns out Haiju wasn't dead, as the leader of Unanimity made Sanmi think. In fact, he shows up in her cell and breaks her out, while Timothy is planning a jailbreak of his own with a few of his inmates in 2012. Of course, Haiju's and Sanmi's escape isn't easy with the authorities on their heels. Oh, by the way, Robert has shot the hateful Vivian, mistakenly though. But hey, potato potato. Also, Vivian doesn't die. Ouch. Meanwhile, Zachary and Meronim are still on their way to Mana Sol. While trying to climb a rock, that old devil comes to tempt Zachary once again to be cowardly and let Meronim fall to her death. But this time Zachary is ready for him, so he does not give in. Finally, they get to Mana Sol where they say the devil resides, and that's when Meronim gives Zachary the straight goods on who Sanmi actually was. Not a god, just a young woman that lived and died many years ago. Zachary's pretty mussed up about it, understandably, and the old devil tries to get Zachary to disbelieve Meronim and kill her, but he overcomes once again, and that's when Meronim tells him that she came to send an SOS to the off-world humans because her people, the Prussians, were dying of a plague. Her past life, Louisa, in 1973, isn't exactly having things going easy though. There's a target on her back now, but luckily for her, Joe Napier. Remember him? The chief security she met on the first day she went to look for Sixsmith's report at the company where he worked. Yeah, that guy. He's helping her. Turns out he served with Lester Ray, her father, during the Korean War. Over in 2144, Sanmi and Haiju have safely gotten to the city where Union, the rebel group, was birthed. Haiju then takes Sanmi to meet the leader of the Union, who tells her about her destiny and why she was created. After that, Sanmi and Haiju, moving on. I thought these guys were some genetically modified humans. How on earth? I guess if there's a will, there's always a way. But what's up with Robert so far? Well, he's now on the run now that he's killed Vivian. The cheap rundown motel he's staying at has this irritating goblin of a man at the front desk, played by Tom Hanks once again. I don't know why they're doing this to everybody's sweetheart. Meanwhile, in 2012, Timothy Cavendish is executing his jailbreak plan. It has a few hiccups initially, but he does get out of Aurora House with his friends. Louisa Ray, on the other hand, is just about to get assassinated again. But Joe Napier helps her evade assassination, and Hook's hitman gets killed. Back in 1849, Adam's doctor is still killing him slowly. Thankfully, the boy Adam helped, Atua, finds out and tries to save Adam. The doctor and the slave get into a mad fight. The doctor even tries to bite off Atua's ear. But just at that moment, Adam gathers his last strength and hits Dr. Goose on the head with the chest of gold he wanted to steal. It's an instant death, of course. After Sanmi and Haiju's shindig, Haiju shows her what happens to fabricants after they are freed or exalted, as the authorities deceive them. The savagery of the whole thing. So the authorities, after they free the fabricants with all of the ceremony and all, they recycle the fabricants and turn them into soap. Guess what? Soap is food for fabricants. So the authorities literally make them eat their own kind. Whoa. Seeing all of that with her own eyes has the desired effect. Before now, Sanmi was unsure about her destiny, but now she's mad and willing to risk her life to burn the system down. She then broadcasts her revelation, but enforcers break in and recapture her, killing Haiju in the process. She's then brought in to be interviewed by the archivist, after which she is executed. Back in the valley, Zachary and Meronim return from Mana Sol, only to find out that the attackers have massacred his entire village, including his sister. Angry, Zachary goes into their territory and kills their leader. Luckily, Katkin, his sister's kid, is there, so he escapes with her. The other attackers try to kill him as he makes makes his escape, but Meronym steps in on time, and together they fight off the rest of the attackers. Afterward, the two board the prescient ship, headed for a new land. In 1936, Robert has finished his piece, The Cloud Atlas. Sixsmith gets to the hotel where Robert has been staying to hide from Vivian, but just before Sixsmith can get to his lover, Robert claps himself in the bathtub. Meanwhile, in 1849, Adam makes it home with the help of his new friend, Ottawa. Once home, Adam removes himself from the business that his father-in-law is into. He and his wife, who we see as Sanmi, then join the abolitionist movement instead. Louisa, on the other hand, managed to get Sixsmith's report from his niece, after which she exposes Hooks and the entire conspiracy that's frankly too boring for me to care about. As for Cavendish, he finally develops the courage to reconnect with Ursula, his old flame. He also writes a screenplay about his adventures, The Ghastly Ordeal of Timothy Cavendish. And with that, we're taken back to the opening scene. The old man in the beginning? Turns out that's Zachary. Apparently he and Meronym started a new family on a new planet, and in the final scene he's recounting his story to his grandchildren. More of the story? Dog, I have no clue. Goodbye.